So as you probably saw from the title there, Wahoo has just announced they are closing down Wahoo's RGT, or basically Road Grand Tours. That's the app they acquired about 18 or so months ago. And that app competes head-to-head with Zwift as a indoor virtual cycling app where you race other people. Now this probably doesn't come as much of a surprise for most people. Just for context, I looked at the live user accounts a couple hours ago before they made this announcement. On RGT, there was 35 people on the entire platform worldwide. Now, admittedly, this was 11 a.m. Central European time on a Monday, 5 a.m. US Eastern time, which is a low point. But that kind of drives home that point even more when you understand that Zwift had 3,902 people on the platform at that exact moment. A massive, massive difference. And certainly, if you went to an evening time period, it'd be a little bit higher on RGT and at the hundreds of people, but that's not really enough to justify an entire platform existing, especially in this day and age. So Wahoo has announced they are closing down the platform effective October 31st. Now, it's really important to note, though, that Wahoo actually has two platforms. They have RGT, this pillar over here of all their racing bits where you, again, like Zwift, and then they have their system platform, which is their structured training platform with structured training videos, and that's effectively like what came out of the Sufferfest acquisition. This piece here, that whole Sufferfest system thing, that remains. That's going to keep on chugging along. It's the RGT piece that they're killing off, and again, as of October 31st. Now, if you had a subscription, you had a subscription actually to both of those combined together. Thus, your subscription is still valid for this piece over here that remains. However, they are giving you a bit of a freebie here. All existing users will get a Zwift subscription as well. So if you are a monthly subscriber to Wahoo's System X, RGT, whatever you want to call it, you will get 3 months free of Zwift. And if you're an annual subscriber to the Wahoo System X thing, then you'll get 12 months free of Zwift. And you'll get a coupon code that you have to redeem by the end of the month, so end of October 31st, and that'll stack onto your existing Zwift subscription. Thus, if you had just bought some sort of Wahoo or Zwift hardware that may have given you a free subscription up to a year or so from now, you'll now get a year on top of that. So you'll be like good to like 2025 or something crazy like that. Likewise, if you have data in RGT, that will also go away as of October 31st. There's no transition of that data over to Zwift. That data is kaput. So that's what happens to subscribers. What happens to the Wahoo employees and all those other things like that. So Wahoo says they're trying to find positions for most of those employees, but they believe up to 4 people could lose their jobs. They could be 1, it could be 4, it could be none. They're still deciding once that transition period happens. Again, the platform's live until the end of October, and then there's certainly some period after that. Further, as part of this, Wahoo is saying they're doubling down on this whole system pillar of stuff. They've got new content coming, they're going to refocus on the app, and they've acknowledged that they have way too many versions of apps out there right now, meaning different Wahoo apps in total, and they're trying to focus on that. They say they're going to have more on what they're doing and what they're adding in the next couple weeks or next, I guess, month or something like that, which makes sense. Most indoor training company announcements tend to happen towards the end of October, early November, so it makes sense that they'll announce that at some point down the road here. Then with all that, Wahoo's also announcing a reconsolidation of sorts of their Wahoo sports science teams. You may have heard in the last year and a half or so, Wahoo opened up a big fancy indoor sports science facility in Boulder, Colorado. They killed that back in August. So they shut that facility down, including one of their heads there, one of their leads, a very well-known sports science coach, Neil Henderson, basically lost a job as part of that transition or whatnot. But then today they've announced they're reconsolidating all the different teams, one in Amsterdam, oddly enough near me, one in Atlanta, and what remains of the Boulder team into one cohesive team that's going to focus on sports science-y stuff in some capacity. All that's a little bit nebulous to me, and I think it's nebulous mostly to consumers as well, partially because unlike if you look at something like Garmin, who have really deep sports science metrics in their products, whether or not you believe those metrics are good or bad is sort of besides the point. They have teams of people that work on those metrics, develop those metrics, test those metrics, etc. Thus, it's more tangible what those outputs are. But Wahoo's products actually don't have any of that stuff. They have under-the-cover stuff where they're validating sensor accuracy and things like that, but they don't have a bunch of like the training load and training recovery and you name it, all the different training blah, blah, blah stuff that Polar and Garmin and even Coros and Suunto and others have. And so what this team does exactly is still a little bit fuzzy. I understand what they do from like a hardware validation standpoint, but what they do from a consumer productization side of things is still a bit unclear to me. Nonetheless, the good news is they're doing something going forward. So that team is entirely gone, so that is positive. Now, What does this mean, I think, for the industry at large? Well, obviously having less options is not a good thing. There's no like real question about that. But I have kind of two thoughts on that. Number one is that there's actually more indoor training apps than there used to be. We have, for example, IndieVelo, which is something I haven't really dug into yet, but it's on my like very short-term radar. That's actually coming from a bit of a spin-off of some of the people that came from Zwift and off into their own platform. And that seems like it's growing quite a bit. There's also been a number of other big platforms that have been announced in the last year or so that are growing, at least in terms of visibility. Whether or not they're growing in terms of their user base is probably a different question. But there is not a shortage of indoor training platforms. However, there is a bit of a shortage of indoor training hardware companies. And we saw that last fall, Wahoo almost went out of business. Like, there's no two ways about that. You can look at the documents that they submitted to the judge as part of the lawsuit against Zwift, a lawsuit that was recently resolved. You can look at the credit ratings agencies that basically rated Wahoo's ability to survive this whole thing as of last fall. Now, Wahoo, just a couple months ago, managed to buy themselves out through a pretty creative accounting trick away from the private equity that had basically bought them initially. And so that's good news for Wahoo. Now, there are many factors for why Wahoo got in that financial trouble. And they would point to kind of that COVID bubble burst of indoor training, as well as a lot of the private equity debt pieces there that they got themselves in trouble on. But I think another piece is they just spread themselves too thin on making a lot of products in a lot of different categories, whether it be watches and pedals and trainers and indoor bikes and different app platforms and on and on and on. And they started to get to the point where those products were no longer like the pinnacle of amazingness that Wahoo products have been known for, but kind of became like the sort of in the middle. We've seen them turn that corner though in the last few months with the release of the Wahoo KICKR Move trainer, which is good to see. We also have seen it with the Wahoo KICKR Bike Shift, which I've got sitting over there as well for review. So again, I think we're starting to see them turn that corner. And ultimately, if you look at something like RGT, it's really hard from a business focus standpoint to justify a platform that can only pull in 35 users on a Monday morning. That's tough. So hopefully this means that instead they can focus on getting the rest of their business better and healthier, and thus we have more competitors and more companies in this indoor hardware landscape than less companies. With that, thanks for watching, and stay tuned. There's plenty more sports technology stuff, including indoor stuff, coming up over the next little while. With that, have a good one.